So here we are again. The party that swears it's on a holy mission to save elections from corruption is suddenly caught twisting the very machinery it claims to protect. The irony, practically theatrical. They shout about integrity from the rooftops, while quietly rearranging the stage behind the curtain. Another headline, another scandal, just another ordinary day in modern politics. With 2026 looming on the horizon, the stakes are climbing fast. Across the country, election officials are tightening procedures, double-checking systems, preparing for the kind of scrutiny that turns every ballot into a battlefield. They're bracing for chaos, for accusations, for the storm they know is coming. And right in the middle of it all, this guy, standing there like he's the guardian of democracy, or maybe the wild card no one saw coming. Depending on who you ask, he's either protecting the vote or playing a far more strategic game.
It's not a birth certificate, Candy, and people are trying to figure out why isn't he giving his birth certificate. It's not a birth certificate.
Oh yes, rest easy, America. Even if you and the whole family are off on some suspicious little midday escape, cruising toward a mystery island for a quick lunch, don't worry. Your ballot can still magically find its way home. Because apparently, no matter where you drift off to, sunshine, scandal, or somewhere in between, democracy will track you down like a certified letter. But let's not get carried away. These little loopholes for mail-in voting, they're framed as rare privileges, special circumstances, emergency-only passes, the kind of thing you're meant to believe happens once in a blue moon, not every election cycle. And then comes the dramatic reminder from the top. This morning, the president steps up to the mic with that grave tone, the one reserved for serious threats, and warns that the very soul of America's election system is hanging by a thread. Integrity, security, trust, big words, delivered with bigger urgency. Because that's the storyline now. While some officials are working overtime to keep the gears turning smoothly in 2026, others are painting the process itself as a ticking time bomb. The message? The system is fragile. The danger is imminent, and only certain people can save it. Convenient timing, isn't it?
Here we are again. We just want common sense measures. I mean, look, you cannot, get a beer, get a wine. I can't even go in and buy, certain types of medications in the drugstore, and I'm 65 without ID and to prove who I am. And this is so foundational, especially in this age of identity theft and the ability of cartel members and organized crime members to really just, undermine people's identity.
Ah, yes. Apparently, we're living in the only nation on Earth reckless enough to allow mail-in voting, provided you pretend the rest of the planet doesn't exist. Because once you actually glance beyond the borders, that dramatic talking point collapses faster than a bad press conference. In 2024, the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance counted at least 34 countries and territories that permit postal voting. 34. Take Australia. They've been mailing ballots for about a century, 100 years, no apocalypse, no collapse, just envelopes and democracy. Canada, every eligible voter can cast a ballot by mail, even Canada. And yes, they've had their political scuffles, but somehow the maple leaves haven't fallen off the flag because someone dropped a ballot in a mailbox. The most dramatic thing that might happen up there is someone politely apologizing while walking to the post office. Pure sitcom energy. And yet, while the rest of the democratic world manages to survive the terrifying existence of envelopes, here comes the grand reveal in Washington. This week, the Republican-led House triumphantly passed the Save America Act, a title so heroic it practically comes with theme music, except the fine print tells a different story. Because beneath that patriotic wrapping paper, voters would be required not just to flash a photo ID at the polls, but to produce documentary proof of citizenship in person to even register, passport, birth certificate, physical paperwork, the kind of documents millions of perfectly eligible citizens don't carry around like concert tickets. And the subtext couldn't be louder if it tried. Trust isn't assumed, it must be proven, on paper, in person, under fluorescent lighting. But relax. Once you've dug through your filing cabinet, unearthed your birth certificate, and presented it like an offering, surely all doubts will evaporate, because nothing says, "We trust you," quite like demanding a second, third, and fourth receipt for your citizenship. Democracy apparently now comes with a paperwork checklist.
Today, 9 Michigan Republicans accused of trying to keep former President Donald Trump in power appeared virtually in an Ingham County courtroom.
Continue to follow the arrest of State Representative David Cole. He was booked into the Madison County Jail Tuesday.
Cole, a Republican, he's charged with voter fraud.
Republican lawmaker Austin Smith has slammed Maricopa County's 2020 vote as a national disgrace and embarrassment. Now it is Smith who's accused of breaking election laws. The charge? He forged petition signatures required to get on the 2024 ballot.
And here's the part that's almost poetic in its audacity. You can rewind the tape, dress it up in legal language, polish it with patriotic slogans, and somehow it still smells the same. Because that tidy little birth certificate requirement? Oh no, it's not some abstract rule floating in the clouds. It lands squarely on real people. Millions of married women, for starters. Women who did something utterly scandalous. They got married and took their spouse's last name. Their driver's license reflects it. Their social security card reflects it. Their entire adult life reflects it. But their birth certificate? Frozen in time. Locked in their maiden name like it's 1998 and nothing has changed. Imagine being told that because you didn't retroactively edit the document issued the day you were born, you might suddenly face hurdles to register to vote. Because the name you've used for decades, on your taxes, your mortgage, your children's school forms, isn't an identical match to the one typed on hospital stationery from decades ago. Picture it. A woman standing at a registration desk, perfectly eligible, perfectly legal, being scrutinized over a surname. All because she dared to say "I do" and update her ID instead of rewriting her birth record. And the irony? If she hadn't changed her name at all, she'd glide right through. But choose tradition, or simply convenience, and suddenly the paperwork becomes a labyrinth. Critics look at this and see exactly what it feels like. A slow, methodical tightening of the gate. A rule that sounds neutral on paper but lands unevenly in practice. A system that raises the bar just high enough to trip certain people on the way over it. Yet not everyone agrees. Some call it common sense security, necessary safeguards. A reasonable request in defense of election integrity, same policy. Two completely different lenses, and that's where the real fight begins.
Voter fraud's a real problem in the country.
Yeah, I know all about it.
Have you ever seen any voter fraud?
Yeah, me, I did it.
You committed voter fraud? What'd you do?
Voted twice for Trump.
Really?
4 years ago, yes.
Did you get in trouble for that?
Yeah, I'm still on probation for it.
Really?
Yeah. Now, if I voted for Hillary, I would have got a gold medal.
Oh, absolutely. Because while international cartels are allegedly busy with their boring side hustles like narcotics and weapons trafficking, their true mastermind operation is obviously suburban voter impersonation. That's the master plan. Forget smuggling routes. The real empire building happens at folding tables with clipboards. I mean, how did we all miss that iconic season of Breaking Bad where Walter White looks at Jesse and says, "Forget the blue stuff. Tonight we forge absentee ballots for the cartel." Riveting television. Emmy-worthy democracy sabotage. And yet, beneath all the breathless warnings about infiltrated polling stations and shadowy operatives stuffing ballot boxes, the numbers tell a far less cinematic story. Between 2000 and 2014, out of more than 1 billion ballots cast, researchers found just 31 credible cases of voter impersonation fraud. 31. Over 14 years. In a nation of hundreds of millions of people. That's not an epidemic. That's a statistical rounding error. It's like installing airport-level security at a lemonade stand because one time, someone walked off without paying 50 cents. Entire legislative crusades built to neutralize a threat so microscopic it practically needs a microscope to exist. Now yes, technically, there were a handful of documented cases. No system on Earth is flawless. But here's where the plot thickens. When you actually peek at those rare instances, the partisan storyline doesn't always align with the dramatic narrative being broadcast. Because if the argument is that one party is heroically cracking down on the other's rampant cheating, well, the public records occasionally tell a more awkward tale. Sometimes the affiliations attached to those cases don't match the villains in the press conference speeches, and that's the uncomfortable twist. The problem being sold as a 5-alarm fire may barely spark, while the political theater around it burns bright enough to light up the entire election cycle.
The FBI last week raided a Fulton County, Georgia election center, seizing ballots and other records related to the 2020 election. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard observed the raid, and two sources say she facilitated President Trump speaking by phone directly to FBI agents involved in the search.
Oh yes, signature forgery. For most of us, that was a teenage crime of convenience, a shaky imitation of mom's cursive to dodge a math test. Petty, embarrassing, almost nostalgic.
One other detail in here, the FBI says that this investigation originated with a referral that was sent by Kurt Olson, who is a Trump-appointed director of election security and integrity now.
Because if we're handing out medals for defenders of democracy, we'd have to polish one up for the same press corps that gets called corrupt on Monday and indispensable on Tuesday. Funny how that works. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The Save America Act, wrapped in flags, trumpeted as heroic, marketed like it's the final shield protecting the republic, might land differently if it weren't arriving after years of gasoline being poured on the public's trust. Trust isn't built with megaphones. It's built with consistency, with restraint, with leaders who accept outcomes even when they sting. Instead, what voters have witnessed is a relentless drumbeat since 2020, a narrative insisting the last presidential election was stolen, rigged, hijacked, corrupted. Claims repeated so often they became background noise. Court cases filed, court cases dismissed, investigations launched, investigations closed. And through it all, even the administration's own attorney general publicly acknowledged there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud that would have changed the outcome. Yet the story didn't end there, because despite that admission, despite recounts and certifications and audits, the suspicion never fully left the stage. It lingered, it hardened, it became doctrine for millions. And then, just recently, another episode added fuel to the fire, another move, another headline, another moment that deepened the divide instead of healing it. That's the core tension. Legislation framed as strengthening confidence coming from leaders who have spent years telling their base the system itself cannot be trusted. You can't spend seasons convincing people the game is fixed, and then act surprised when they don't trust the referees. And that contradiction? That's where the real drama lives.
And the Justice Department is suing Nevada, saying the state is improperly withholding voter data requested as part of the investigation into elections.
Nevada is not alone. The Justice Department is also suing Colorado, Hawaii, and Massachusetts. Federal prosecutors say they're looking to enforce voter registration and access laws, but Nevada officials say they're worried about privacy.
Oh yes, nothing to see here. Just a completely routine, perfectly ordinary federal raid involving election materials tied to claims that have already been investigated, audited, litigated, and widely debunked. Totally standard stuff. Happens all the time, right? And then, because this is modern politics and we get that phone call, the President of the United States ringing up the agents involved. Brief, they said. Maybe a minute. Harmless. One official even compared it to a pep talk, a halftime speech, just a little motivational nudge, a pep rally. Because when I think law enforcement independence, I immediately picture a locker room speech. We've all seen those speeches, haven't we? The coach pacing back and forth, voice echoing, sweat flying. But imagine this version. All right, team, I don't care who wins. Go out there and fight like hell for either side. This isn't about the scoreboard. I just want to see points up there. Doesn't matter whose name they're under. Clear eyes, full hearts, whatever outcome works. That's not a pep talk. That's chaos with a whistle, and that's what makes it feel so surreal. You can't spend years insisting elections are sacred battlegrounds, that fraud is lurking behind every ballot, and then casually blur the lines between political leadership and federal investigation like it's a sideline huddle. Now enter the figure operating behind the curtain in the Fulton County situation, the ally positioned squarely in Trump's orbit, the one pushing the machinery forward, the connective tissue between political grievance and official action. That's where the story tightens. Because this isn't just about a raid, it's about optics, about power, about who is influencing whom, and whether the public is supposed to believe this is all coincidence. The bigger question humming underneath all of it isn't whether halftime speeches exist, it's whether the referee is suddenly stepping into the locker room, and once that line gets blurry, that's when the real drama begins. So now we get to the man of the hour, Kurt Olson, not a sitcom character, not a punchline, an attorney who made his name riding the wave of 2020 election challenges and crashing headfirst into courtrooms across multiple states. In Arizona, a federal judge sanctioned him for advancing false claims tied to election fraud litigation, not dismissed quietly. Sanctioned. In Georgia, efforts connected to challenges over voting machines, including actions on behalf of the DeKalb County Republican Party, went nowhere. The courts weren't persuaded, the theories didn't hold, the cases failed, and yet here he is, re-emerging in the conversation as part of the larger Save America crusade. Rebranded not as the lawyer whose arguments collapsed under scrutiny, but as a defender of democracy. That's where the optics start to creak. Because when you frame legislation as a sacred rescue mission, when you wrap it in flags and urgency and warnings about collapse, the public naturally asks, who exactly is steering this ship, and what's their track record? It's like hiring a referee who's already been benched for bad calls and announcing he's now in charge of preserving the integrity of the game. You can insist it's about fairness all you want, but voters have Google, and that's the tension sitting right at the center of this entire drama. After years of insisting elections can't be trusted, after lawsuits, sanctions, rejected claims, audits that change nothing, this is the team assembled to restore confidence. Trust isn't demanded, it's earned, carefully, repeatedly. So when the same figures who amplify debunked claims are suddenly cast as guardians of electoral purity, skepticism isn't shocking. It's inevitable. And that's the political gamble unfolding in real time. Can you rebuild faith in a system while surrounding yourself with the very voices who convinced millions it was broken? That's the question hanging over all of it. Worried about privacy? Oh, come on. Why would anyone possibly be concerned? It's not like the Department of Justice recently dropped a trove of documents tied to Jeffrey Epstein, revealing the names of survivors while conveniently shielding certain alleged co-conspirators behind thick black bars of redaction. Totally confidence-inspiring. Nothing says trust the process quite like selective transparency. And if raising an eyebrow at that feels a little uncomfortable, well, heaven forbid we use the word juvenile. Some folks get very sensitive around that term, especially when island references start floating around the conversation. But let's zoom out. Republicans love to insist that Democrats are the ones eroding public faith in elections, that somehow skepticism is manufactured by the opposition, and yet, look at the scoreboard. You have Donald Trump pardoning figures tied to January 6th. You have lawmakers reframing January 6th Capitol attack as if it were a guided tour with extra enthusiasm. You have the same unfounded claims about 2020 repeated so often they've become a political lullaby. At some point, the call is coming from inside the House, because when the party in power, controlling the White House, Congress, and enjoying a friendly Supreme Court majority, continues to hammer away at the legitimacy of past elections, it creates a paradox. You can't simultaneously run the system and declare it hopelessly corrupt. That contradiction doesn't build faith, it fractures it. And when one voter summed it up by saying, "The way we do this is unbelievable," it didn't feel like hyperbole. It felt like exhaustion. Now, before you go, if you appreciate sharp, independent political commentary that isn't mass-produced in a party war room, consider subscribing. The button's right there on your screen. It keeps this conversation alive. And here's the reality we're navigating. We're in a media landscape where platforms can tilt algorithms, tweak visibility, or quietly demote voices that get a little too inconvenient. That means creators like me are operating at the mercy of a handful of tech executives whose priorities may or may not align with open scrutiny. So if you want to stay connected no matter what the algorithm decides, signing up for the newsletter is the safest bet. It's free, direct, and ensures that if the digital winds shift, we don't lose touch. There's also an option for paid support if you want to help keep the lights on and the research flowing. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for watching, and stay curious.